CL hated me for years, but after a tragic miscarriage, we welcomed her back. Now she's telling my child that she's his real mom. Hey there! So, let me tell you about my life a bit. My husband David and I have been hitched for 8 years now. We have an awesome little boy named Tom, who's 4. Tom's a ball of energy with this wild imagination. And yeah, he's definitely a mama's boy. Not that I mind, because I know once he's a teenager, he'll probably be off doing his own thing. David and I make a great team. We've got this whole routine down pat, juggling house stuff, taking care of Tom, and even keeping up with our careers. Honestly, it's been smooth sailing thanks to David being such a respectful and communicative partner. You'd think I'd have no complaints, right? Well, stick around because I'm here to talk about David's sister, Kathy. From day one, Kathy's been a tough nut to crack. She's always been frosty with me, even though David and I have been together for so long now. I remember David warning me that while his parents would probably love me, Kathy might give me a hard time because she's super protective of him. Boy, was he right. At our first dinner together, she grilled me about my family, my childhood, my siblings, everything. No matter what I said, she acted all unimpressed and even brought up David's exes to compare them to me. So awkward. Then, out of nowhere, she suggested David join her and her girlfriends for a trip to clear his head before getting serious with me. I got visibly annoyed, and David had to step in and tell her to back off, albeit too politely for my taste. That's the thing about David. He does stand up to her but isn't super firm about it, which I think makes Kathy feel like she can keep pushing my buttons. It was pretty clear after that dinner that Kathy and I weren't going to be besties. It stung a bit, but I wasn't about to beg for her approval. I stayed polite whenever we met, but she never made it easy. One time at David's grandparents' anniversary party, she completely ignored me. Then, during a family photo, she loudly told me to get out of the picture, calling me one of her brother's bimbos. I was mortified, and everyone else looked super uncomfortable. David tried to argue, but Kathy just kept talking over him. I ended up leaving the party, feeling humiliated. David's family was really sweet about it, rushing to apologize and trying to convince me to stay, but the damage was done. I even thought about breaking up with David because of how unbearable Kathy was. However, David showed up at my place later with flowers and pastries, apologizing and saying he was done with his sister's nonsense. He even threatened to cut her off, which apparently made her cry. For a while, David stuck to his guns. We avoided Kathy completely. He stopped taking her calls and even changed the locks on his place. His parents backed him up, so Kathy had to deal with it. We thought she'd eventually come around and regret her behavior, but nope. She just got worse. Kathy started leaving me threatening messages and even showed up at my work one day, causing a scene. My manager had to kick her out. That was the breaking point for me. I told David I couldn't deal with his sister's craziness anymore and was considering breaking up, maybe even taking legal action against her. David was really torn up, pleading with me not to leave and promising to handle it. So, he convinced his parents to step in more forcefully. And that's where we're at now. Dealing with Kathy has been a nightmare, but David's trying really hard, and I'm just hoping things will get better. Wish me luck. So, there was this meeting at David's house between him and Kathy, and it ended up being their last real conversation. David's parents knew all about what Kathy was doing to me and made it super clear they didn't want anything to do with her anymore. David and his folks warned Kathy that her behavior was totally out of whack, and if she kept it up, they'd back me if I decided to take her to court. Somehow, Kathy finally broke down to her and admitted she needed help. She opened up about spiraling out of control and feeling completely lost. She even told everyone that she had lost her job and had been unemployed for months, which had just made her mental health take a nosedive. Thankfully, David's parents stepped in and got her admitted to a psychiatric hospital right away so she could get the help she needed. David made it clear that he didn't want to stay in touch with her, and Kathy finally accepted it. She sent me an apology text, which honestly felt kinda half-hearted, but for her sake, I hoped she would get better. When David and I got married, we decided not to invite Kathy, even though she had been discharged and seemed to be doing well. I just wanted nothing to do with her, and everyone respected that. She did send us flowers to congratulate us, which I appreciated. But right after our honeymoon, Kathy announced she was getting married. We were all shocked because none of us even knew she was dating anyone. Turns out, she met this guy James while she was in the psych hospital. To give you some context, James was schizophrenic and had violent tendencies according to his doctors. Naturally, David and Kathy's parents were pretty worried. Kathy announced her wedding would be next month and wanted only David to be there, not me. I kind of expected that and was actually relieved I didn't have to come up with an excuse not to go. David felt snubbed that his sister only invited him, so he didn't go either. Folks who did go to the wedding told us it was a total disaster. Kathy and James were completely wasted during the ceremony. They couldn't even repeat the vows after the priest. At the reception, James kept drinking and got so drunk he started tearing off his shirt and pants in front of everyone. Being schizophrenic, he freaked out when people stared and ended up attacking a server, accusing him of looking suspicious. James's family managed to calm him down and convinced the server not to press charges by paying him off. This whole scene left everyone worried about Kathy's safety. If James could attack a random person, what about Kathy? David and his parents tried to talk to Kathy about James's behavior, but she was convinced she could change him. No matter how much they warned her, she believed he would never hurt her. I wish I could say she was right, but you can guess what happened. Over the years, James isolated her from everyone. Police were called to their place a few times due to loud arguments and physical fights, but Kathy refused to accept any help. 4 years ago, I got pregnant with our son Tom. Everyone was thrilled. I wanted Kathy to be part of my baby shower, so we sent her an invite. We didn't get a reply, which worried us, so David drove over to check on her. Turns out, James had completely cut her off from us and had thrown away our invitation. David and James had a heated argument, but Kathy sided with James, thinking he'd done nothing wrong. Frustrated, David left, and that was the last time we had any contact with her. When after Tom was born, her parents stopped trying, and we just hoped she was okay. Life was peaceful and full of love after Tom was born. David and I never had major issues, and we found a great rhythm in our marriage. Tom kept us busy with his antics, and David's parents visited every weekend to babysit so we could have our date nights. Everything was going smoothly until about 8 months ago when Kathy showed up at our doorstep, all muddy and disheveled, without shoes. We let her in immediately, and I rushed to get her a blanket as she was shivering. We hadn't seen her in years, so we didn't know what to say. David kept stroking her hair, asking if she was okay. Kathy seemed numb, staring off into space. Eventually, she told us she had just miscarried. We were shocked as she explained she got pregnant a month ago and thought James would be happy. At first, he was, but over time, he became paranoid, thinking the baby would take her away from him. They fought a lot, and he even threatened to mix rat. So, there was this whole mess where Kathy's food was poisoned to make her lose her baby. She told us she woke up feeling really off that day, and when she went to the doctor, found out she'd lost the baby. She felt so terrible and numb that she couldn't even drive home, so she decided to walk. Somehow, she ended up at our house, barefoot and all. She'd walked like 20 blocks or something and had no idea why she didn't have shoes on. I felt so bad for her. I gave her a hug, and after a moment, she hugged me back. We just sat there for about 5 minutes while she cried in my arms. That's when we knew she was asking for help. David was all ready to go confront James, but I convinced him to call the cops and talk to their parents instead. Her folks were super grateful and promised to support her no matter what. When the police heard her story, they were just as shocked as we were. Turns out, James had been abusive all along, and he was arrested right away. He kept denying any involvement in her miscarriage, but Kathy's toxicology report showed she'd been poisoned by him, which caused her to lose the baby. Long story short, because of James's mental issues, the judge sent him to a psychiatric facility indefinitely. It was frustrating, but also a relief to have Kathy safe. At this point, any bad feelings I had towards Kathy were gone. I just wanted to help her heal. She seemed more calm around me and wasn't mean anymore. When we thought she was ready, we introduced her to Tom, hoping it'd help her recover. She quickly got super close to Tom, which we didn't mind at first, though maybe that should have been a red flag. Over the next few weeks, Kathy started spending more time with Tom, often showing up unannounced. She was staying with her and David's parents, so she could easily drive over. She'd give Tom baths, read him bedtime stories. At first, it seemed like a nice gesture, but then it started to feel off. She'd come over almost every day and stay longer than necessary, bringing toys and gifts for Tom. She even made comments about his clothes and hairstyle, which bugged me a bit. While I appreciated her bonding with him, it felt like she was undermining me, but this time with my son instead of her brother. My mom instincts kicked in, and I talked to David. He assured me I was overthinking. It was just Kathy coping with her loss. Feeling guilty, I decided to let it slide. If taking care of Tom made her happy, what's the harm, right? Days went by, and Kathy became a constant presence in our house. She started looking after Tom when we were at work, and even took him to the park in the evenings. But I noticed Tom didn't seem as excited to see me anymore. He wouldn't run up to greet me and looked at me differently. After Kathy left, I'd try to talk to him about his day, but he was less chatty and seemed sad. As his mom, I was really worried, but David kept telling me I was overthinking it. Feeling uneasy, I talked to a coworker who suggested getting nanny cams. I thought it was a brilliant idea, so I bought a couple and set them up in Tom's room and the living room. I didn't tell David because I didn't want him to dismiss my feelings again. Yesterday, after Tom went to bed, I checked the footage while David was watching TV downstairs. At first, it was just Kathy playing with Tom, and she seemed great with him, but then she pulled out a book from her purse that I hadn't seen before. It wasn't one of Tom's usual books. As she read it to him, I realized it was about adoption and how sometimes a mother gives up her child to another mother. She kept adding stuff, like how she left Tom with me because she wasn't ready back then. My eyes widened in horror as she told my child that no matter what, she would always be his real mother, and no one could love him more than her. She kissed his forehead and left him to nap. My hands shook with anger as I finally understood what was going on. So, guess what I found out? Kathy had been feeding my son who knows what nonsense for who knows how long, and it's been making him act super weird around me. The poor kid must have been so confused, not knowing what's real or what to believe. I was ready to storm downstairs and tell my husband to never, ever let his sister into our home again. But something held me back. Instead, I thought, why not take the day off and spend some quality time with my son? Maybe I can figure out what Kathy has been saying to mess with his head. When I told Kathy she didn't need to babysit that day, she totally freaked out, insisting she loves spending time with my son. But I stood my ground and told her to back off. I wanted a day with my kid. My son David did ask if I was feeling okay, and I told him everything was fine, that I just needed a break. Later, I took him to his favorite park, and we spent the whole day playing, eating pizza, and just having fun. I wanted him to feel safe and happy before we had any serious talk. Once he was relaxed, I gently started asking him about what he and Aunt Kathy had been talking about. He got super quiet, and I promised him he wasn't in trouble. I just wanted him to know he could tell me anything. That's when he spilled the beans. Kathy had been trying to convince him she was his real mother. Even though he didn't really believe her, she kept telling him I'd eventually leave him because only real mothers love their kids. He was scared to ask me about it because he thought I might actually kick him out. My heart broke hearing that. He said he loved me and didn't want to go live with Kathy. At that moment, seeing his teary face, I just wanted to make everything okay. I knelt down, took his hands, and told him we'd get through this together, no matter what. I hugged him tight, feeling all his fears and pain. I felt like such a failure for not protecting him from this psycho sooner. I told him he didn't need to worry, that David, my husband, and I would handle it. Then my son dropped another bombshell. David already knew about all this. I asked what he meant, and he said, I asked Daddy, and he knows. He told me not to tell you. I was stunned. My husband knew about this and chose to protect his sister over our son? No way could I let my son stay around these people. I packed our bags and called my parents, saying I wanted to spend some time with them. They were super supportive, thank goodness. When David called and found the house empty, I tried to act normal, saying I needed a break from work and home. He sounded suspicious, but didn't push it too much. As I write this, I've already told my parents everything, and they're just as shocked as I am about Kathy's lies. David called and sounded cautious, but I assured him I'd just be at my parents' for a few days. We rarely fight, so he probably didn't think much of it. Still, I'm so conflicted and don't know what to do next. How do I confront this mess? Was I right to distance my son and myself from David's crazy sister? Update 1. Wow! I woke up to 600 plus comments on my post. I can't believe so many people use Reddit and found my story. I made sure to use fake names so David's family wouldn't recognize us. For those criticizing me for not talking to my husband first, trust me, I would have if my son hadn't told me he tried talking to David already. My motherly instinct told me that confrontation with my husband wouldn't solve anything since he'd been gaslighting me the whole time. I needed to get my son out of there immediately, and he's much safer with my parents now. Kathy's been bombarding me with messages, wanting to see my son, but I plan to shut this down once and for all at the upcoming family get-together. We'd planned it weeks ago to spend time with David's grandparents, but now I'm going to use it to tell everyone the truth and ensure Kathy stays away from my son. Update 2. I confronted David at the family get-together. I was so nervous, but took the nanny cam recording for proof. During lunch, I called out Kathy in front of everyone. She tried to laugh it off until I showed the video. Her face went pale. I sent the video to our family group chat so everyone could see the truth. I was absolutely horrified when I saw her trying to convince my son that she was his real mom. After that, I confronted David and let him know how badly he had failed to protect our son. He looked super guilty but tried to explain himself, saying he didn't think it was a big deal and hoped it would help his sister with her grief. He was torn between supporting his sister and telling me, but he chose to keep quiet. I told him flat out that because of his actions, I can't trust him anymore, and I won't let our son be around him or his family ever again. For the first time in ages, I saw my husband break down in tears, but I stood my ground on my decision. I made it clear that I can't have my son grow up in a family where his dad won't stand up for him just to protect his troubled sister. David and Kathy's parents and grandparents apologized to me and promised they'd make sure Kathy stays far away from our son. Kathy looked totally humiliated, but she didn't have the decency to apologize. David kept trying to justify what he did, but I wasn't having any of it. I left soon after that confrontation because I was done and didn't want anything more to do with them. Update 3. I see some of you are confused about my decision, so let me clarify. Yes, I am planning to divorce my husband. I know some of you think I should give him a second chance since it wasn't entirely his fault, and I agree, David is a good guy. But being a good person doesn't automatically make him a good father. Just because we didn't have problems doesn't mean he was a good dad to Tom. He should have shut this down from the start when our son came to him with doubts, instead of trying to cover it up and gaslight me for weeks. Both me and my son can't trust him anymore. I welcomed Kathy back into my life after everything she went through, because I felt sorry for her as a fellow woman, but in the end, she showed why I never really liked her in the first place. I get that the abuse Kathy went through was extremely traumatic, but our son shouldn't have to pay for it. She's a grown woman with obvious mental issues that we thought she had gotten over. What really shocked me was my husband prioritizing her mental health over our son's well-being. It proved to me that he shouldn't be around Tom. He was always such a supportive husband, and I thought I could trust him. But since what happened with Kathy, it's clear he wanted to protect her more than us. From now on, I promise to protect my son no matter what. I'm confident I can get full custody if I bring up his family's history during the custody battle.